Cool. All right. Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thank you.
Good to have you.
Yes.
Cheers.
Excited to be here.
So we sip our American-sized mugs of
coffee. So it can be absolutely jacked up on caffeine for the next hour.
More and more jittery as things go. Well, people don't want to hear me talk. Tell everybody who you are, man. Who are you? You're like a buffed Jesus.
Besides buff Jesus on my resume, my name's Conrad Sherby, and I'm one of your best friends from like the last almost 2 decades now. No, decade.
Baker's decade.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And we've grown a lot together, and our practice have maybe diverged a little bit. And a lot of my continuing education has gone into looking at the neurological underpinnings of human behavior, and that's kind of been habit and behavior change, looking at the body and how that can like help dictate our health outcomes. Like, how can we nourish the body and mind to have the best health outcomes? And I guess like this journey, so it kind of ran parallel with my own journey, with a lot of depression and anxiety through my 20s, like never feeling like I'm good enough, a lot of negative self-talk, self-hatred. And so while I was looking to help my clients grow, I was also like very curious on my own end, right? Like my degree's in physiology, same way. And it's like, oh, like how can I find more tools to like make not just my life better, but my clients? And kind of pursue that down the rabbit hole, looking at different mind-body medicine techniques that are offered out there, like in the kind of the secular world. And the common thread between all of them, like if you look at apps like Headspace, Sam Harris's Waking Up, a lot of them have their foundational practices in Buddhism. Okay. And they have different traditions. Some of them, I haven't dug deep into like what Sam Harris teaches, but I know like with Headspace, a lot of those are kind of Tibetan and Vipassana techniques, 2 different ones. Vipassana comes from the Theravada tradition, of Buddhism. There are kind of 2 main schools. I guess I'm kind of going down the rabbit hole of like Mahayana and Theravada, broadly speaking.
Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, so I followed it down there, and that's really come to inform my own practice, how I coach, how I'm teaching, and I've kind of backed away. I've always was really uncomfortable with personal training. It has a lot of shame associated with it. Like I can be lovable when I've changed my body into something, right? Like this like performance mindset. And I've always been more interested in growth mindset. So I'm saying I teach the skills to help people nourish their bodies and minds, so they can do really what they want, right? Like there's this fixation on aesthetic in our culture. I think it's fair to say. I'm not a mind reader.
I agree with you absolutely. It's like if I'm pretty, then I will be popular and people will like me.
Yeah, or like I'll be worthy of a partner who loves me and treats me well if I look like if I'm getting divorced or looking to get a new relationship or like whatever happens to be. So actually that drives that desire to become, drives the fitness industry. And so just kind of being a little counterpoint to that. And that's kind of how my practice has evolved. And and we'll kind of, I guess, we'll explore this as things go along.
Well, it's interesting because one of the tenets of Buddhism, and my very layperson understanding, I have chipped the iceberg of understanding that, whereas you are well below the waterline, and from what I understand is one of the tenets of Buddhism is being comfortable with change. Like the impermanence of things, and I'd like to get into that a little bit later. And I think the impermanence of things would be kind of more entropic, but in the long run, like we go up and then we die. But on the topic of personal training, where you and I kind of thrive in that world, is I think it at the entry level, it could be you're going to be seen as, and I'm air quoting, better if you change your current state. But would it not be worth acknowledging to see that sometimes the change needs to be from not a I'll be liked if I change myself, but I will be a better, healthier person, more physically, and the psychological and the physical go hand in hand. So is that worth acknowledging, do you think?
Yeah, I may have gotten a little lost in the question.
It was okay. So let me now that I've kind of laid the playing field here. So personal training, let's just call it Instagram personal trainers. Okay. Like kind of like, your biceps aren't as big as me, so you're not worth shit. Technical term there.
Yeah.
However, the other side of it, whereas there's a true pandemic of health in the world, well, in our country, we'll just leave it at that, because people have too much comfort, and their obesity is 40%, and obesity is prevalent in kids. So my question is, do you agree that there is a need to change towards the healthier side of the spectrum?
Oh yeah, there's definitely there's totally need, and it's funny, I'll bring kind of back and forth. I hope it to come off as proselytizing between Buddhist practice and this practice, because Buddhist practice, right? The Buddha didn't say what he was. I'm teaching Buddhism, right? I teach his Dhamma, or truth or awakening, the way things are, and it was described. He used a lot of allegories and similes in what he described how he teaches. Famous for that. He was a wonderful teacher. He knew his audience. He'd always contextualize it. And it's often described as a path. And it is as you practice, ethical practice, wisdom practices, concentration practices, kind of the three pillars of Buddhist practice, it is a path, and you grow along that. And then there is an end, or a path, right, implies an end. The same with training, right? So there's this parallel here, but it's also a transformative process. It's another way he describes it. I just was finished reading this thing called the Heartwood Sutta, and I won't go into the whole thing, but it's almost like we're a tree, right? If you are trying to find the heartwood, the richness, if you want to build a home or a boat, it's the deep inside, stable, and it can be very tempting to be oh, is this the heartwood? Are these the leaves, the branches? But as we progress in practice, no matter what kind, whether it's physical practice or spiritual practice or contemplative. Right, we're working to the heartwood to transform ourselves, and so that's more of an inner thing, right, than an external path.
Okay.
That's kind of circuitous there of an answer,
That's
but
fine.
But the change does need to happen, and it can manifest as a path in individuals, right, at a societal level, right. But the thing we have most agency over, and this is why I found the investigative nature of Buddhist practice so compelling, is it puts agency and a path in front of the practitioner in a way that often the bootstrap mentality, right, that kind of almost too in the West could be conflated, the pick yourself up by your bootstraps, right,
right,
make something of yourself,
put your back into it.
Yeah, well, that is so loaded, right? I think most of the audience, or what I do is we talk about it, right, that doesn't take into account someone's context in their life, where they are maybe emotionally. We're emotional creatures well before rational creatures. Their social setting, their environmental setting, right? Are their basic Maslowian needs taken care of, or are they homeless and then food crisis? You're not gonna be picking any bootstraps up if you don't feel safe.
Yeah.
Mix that metaphor. And so
I
you what I'm saying.
Yeah. If you don't have boots, if you are picking strawberries in a field all day, you might be tired, and maybe getting to that next level is damn near impossible, and you might need more than okay, what does that mean? Pick yourself up. But I do that constantly, literally. I need a figure to. I'm just speaking in the metaphor here, but it's not a one size fits all solution.
Yeah, the bootstraps is too, I think, broad and doesn't give someone a specific path. That mentality, where again, Buddhist practice is open investigation, so an individual can say, "Hey, how am I contributing to my suffering?" And I think, so it's what do I actually have control? What do I have agency over? And that's where the Buddha and many of the parts of the suttas and the teachings, would be
suttas are teachings.
Suttas are teachings. Okay. Yeah, it'd be I teach two things: suffering and how to end suffering. And there's very little talk of metaphysical. In fact, you'll often avoid it in all the written suttas. No, I don't talk about that. I don't teach that. Right? My knowledge, I have this knowledge of the forest. This is the Buddha, right? Buddha. Yeah, he'd be I have a knowledge of all the forest, but he's and picks up leaves, and he's but this is what I teach. Right? This is what is important. This is what helps with our most agency in in this life. I'm paraphrasing there.
No, it's fine. It's what I'm taking just to, because I understand things through analogies and metaphors, and what I'm hearing is, and I want to reel the line back in after this, and talk about what Buddhism is and kind of like open up from there. But what I'm hearing is like most people are interested in running really fast, but they may need to learn to tie their shoes beforehand. Running really fast being the spiritual enlightenment of what they're trying to attain, and they may not see that if you're going to run really fast, you might want to tie your sneakers up pretty tight first. Is that analogous at all to Buddha holding leaves, and leaves being the shoelaces in this analogy, and then the spiritual enlightenment?
I think, no, it's a little different.
Okay.
It would be more like, I want to run really fast. And so the Buddha's like, I will teach you like those skills to like run really fast. But they're like, well, tell me more about plyometrics. Or like, what about like, what God should I pray to go faster? And like all these like things that may not really matter to the issue at hand, which is how do I run faster?
Okay.
And in this case, it's like, I teach suffering and like, what is it? How to look at it, how to know it, and how to end it. Right. So in this case, it'd be like, I teach running, I teach you how to do it like well and like this thing. But all the other things, right, those metaphysical bits, and there's plenty of huge Buddhist cosmology and traditions, especially like in Mahayana and Theravada, like, but especially in the West, as I've practiced it, it's not necessarily as pertinent, and that may be a choice of Western teachers. Again, I'm kind of digressing.
It's fine.
But it's still very much like, again, I'm totally...
Let's reel the line back in.
You're
going to reel the line back in. What is Buddhism? From Siddhartha, who was a prince, who left his palace to go wander the world, to... Is that right?
To some degree, yeah.
Good. All right. Show's over. Good stuff.
Yeah, all right.
What is it? How would you explain it to the layperson? Me.
Okay.
What am I getting into?
Yeah, so I think... I can only speak to my experience. I should make that very clear.
Okay.
And what I've studied and learned over my course of my practice, because I think it's very different, I think, for different people. Like if you went to like Southeast Asia, and how they practice is very different than how we're practicing, out here.
Okay.
Like how the teachers teach, the metaphors, the analogies, growing up in a Buddhist culture, like in Thailand or Vietnam, like their experience is going to be very different, and their relationship to it. But as to my understanding,
how long have you been practicing this?
4 years.
4 years?
4 years, yeah. So I'm...
Practicing and teaching.
Yeah, like the last year and a half,
okay.
Largely like when the pandemic hit, there was a need. I'm like, I've been very rigorously and with a lot of skillful effort practicing. I'm like, hey, I can help out. Like everyone's mental health is going to shit. And
I remember calling you several times like, hey, you want to hang out? And you're like, no, I'm on a silent meditation for a week. And I'm like, well, I guess it hasn't started yet. And I'm like, no, I'm texting. It's fine.
Yeah, it's like,
wow, a week. That's a lot. Anyway, okay, so here.
Yeah, so I guess speaking to my practice, and that's why I want to contextualize things, right? Because it's important to say, like, to my knowledge, to my experience, and what I've read and what I've heard. And it might be different for other people and their experience of Buddhist practice. But Buddhism is described as like a humanistic ethical value set in some ways. But its most fundamental, it's a path of investigation to mitigate your suffering or end your suffering. Nibbana is described as kind of like a cooling. And the Buddha never kind of talks about the end of the path as to what it is, but what it's not. Say like it's the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. Those are considered like the three defilements. Like those as motivating factors for behavior, for action. And in that absence, all the wholesome states that do arise. So that's kind of the end. So when he talked about the two things, right, I teach suffering and the end of suffering, that's essentially it. And so what causes suffering? And so in life, right, we have events, things that happen to us that we have no control over, right? Pompeii explodes, we have very little control over that. And you could be like, oh, I shouldn't have built my house there. Or like, you could tell these whole narratives like, well, this is the gods punishing me, right? And the mind can create all these added layers of suffering. If we go to like fitness, we're talking about people shoulding all over themselves than to say like, oh, I should really work out, like, I should have worked out sooner, and you flagellate yourself. You're like hitting yourself with a flail, or rather than just doing the thing. And especially in the West, you're like, oh, I should be doing X, Y, or Z. I should be doing. People say keto. I should do this diet. And in Buddhism, right? So it's at its core, it's about ending your suffering or mitigating your suffering. And we'll make a little caveat here. The word is dukkha, and it actually can be just translated as distress, stress, unsatisfactoriness, but typically as suffering. And the reason I want to provide some of that nuance is because it does span this spectrum of like, at one end, the anticipation of waiting for an Amazon package, or like waiting for an email of acceptance to a class, or that feeling on the inside, that anticipation, can really kind of feel like distress. You're like, oh, I can't wait. Your mind keeps going back into it over and over again. And then you maybe further along the scale, it could be you break a leg. There's physical suffering, right? That is the pain, the body saying like, hey, don't walk on this, right? This needs to heal, or like mitigate your movement. To full blown, you could have like losing children. You're a refugee in a war zone. You're trying to get something like intense emotional, physical suffering. And that all kind of falls on a spectrum. But it is all part of our human experience, and how to look at that with unself-centered attachment. So you kind of touched on that earlier. So
unself-centered attachment. Okay.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to unpack that.
Yeah. So I'll go back. So it's about mitigating our suffering. That's what the practice is about. And ideally, it would be about entering the stream or getting closer to enlightenment. And in the first part of Buddhism, the Buddha laid out the Four Noble Truths. And the first one is like, there is suffering, right? That is an inherent part of life. And the cause of that suffering is self-centered attachment. Right? This is mine. The ego attaching itself to things like, this is my hut, right? On like the plains of like Pompeii, like this is mine. The gods, why would they do this to me? Like, this is mine. How could they, this is me, mine, and I, me, and mine is attachment. And those attachments, the stories we tell ourselves, I'm a good friend. Why would my friend do that to me? I'm a good partner. How could they have done this? Or, right, that kind of self-centered attachment. And we can unpack that a little bit more. And then there is a way to end that suffering. So that's step 3.
So we've got suffering.
Yeah.
We've got the identification of the
root.
Self. The root
is that the self-centered attachment.
Self-centered attachment. Okay, and kind of identification.
Yeah, or clinging. Yeah.
And then the third is the solution to that.
Yeah.
And then
the fourth is the acknowledgement. Sorry, the third is the acknowledgement that there is a way to end this.
Okay.
And then the fourth is the Eightfold Path.
Okay.
And that is the like practical guide, if you will, to enlightenment.
Got it.
Of
the handbook to.
Yeah. And so the nice thing about the Four Noble Truths is that it's laid out kind of like a differential diagnosis. So much of what attracted me to Buddhism, it's a kind of very practical, and it's investigative and very kind of scientific. And it was laid out like a differential diagnosis, right? Like, what's the problem? Or what's the disease, or what are the symptoms, right? Like, what's the solution, or what's the cause? Is there a treatment? What's the treatment? Right, that's how it's laid out. And so going through that, the Eightfold Path is a very practical set of teachings. And it first begins with...
Before we get into that,
sorry.
We're gonna go
down the rabbit hole.
So let's talk about the first two. The first two pillars. The first, again, is the identification. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you could say the identification of suffering, like the nature of suffering.
The nature of suffering. And the second is the suffering because of the I, me identification.
Yeah, self-centered attachment.
Self-centered attachment.
Or craving. Yeah.
So the question I have is would self-centered attachment have to stem from the identification of the self first? And where does that stop? I'm not asking that very well. So how did I want to say that? Oh, I don't know. Never mind. It'll come back. That's okay. So self-centered attachment. So there, it's. I guess my question is, it's okay to be the self, to identify as I am Philip.
Yeah.
And I exist. Where the line gets kind of crossed into the less than healthy is like, this is my mug. Don't touch it. Or like, I'm a good friend. Why did you not call me back? Or is that kind of what you're saying? It's okay to identify yourself. It's like...
I would say it's a little complicated.
Of course, because it's not a simple subject.
Exactly.
Not a simple subject at all. I feel like we're both going to be like...
Yeah, like we can do this all day. Because self-view... So, in the path to enlightenment, the first fetter, the chain that we have towards like achieving enlightenment is actually described as self-view, sakkaya-ditthi. It's one of the first things we have to let go of in order to achieve these like states of bliss.
So what are you after that?
So that's kind of, that is described, right? But it's the self-view is a convenient fiction. I know it doesn't get kind of a little metaphysical, maybe outside the scope of it, but it's that clinging to like, well, what is the self, right? You said like, I'm Conrad Sherby. I'm 36 years old. Well, I was also Conrad Sherby. I was 10 years old. I was 16. Which Conrad am I? Am I the Conrad yesterday? Am I Conrad 10 years in the future? And what are my attachments to this view? Like, well, I'm a Buddhist. I'm attached to these teachings. Right? Nobody better mess with them. Well, that's an attachment. To like, I'm attached to like trying to achieve enlightenment.
So you can see where it's kind of like, how do I win scenario? Like, how do I not? There you go. I'm setting myself up there. How do I attain enlightenment scenario? Where it's like, if I follow the Eightfold Path, am I not also attached to that?
Okay, this is perfect. So, because that's a very Western mindset and one I kind of fall into, this strivingness. So if we bring it back to fitness,
From the West, baby.
That's right. But like this, it's served us well. Like the thinking mind has helped us achieve magnificent things. Our ancestors have gotten us here, right? Like we're no longer subject to famine.
We don't have to hunt for our food anymore. We can
like women dying in childbirth. There we go, right? Like we can
polio's not a thing.
Yeah, polio's not a thing, right? We're not beset by
bad
these
flu wasn't killing. Anyway, the list goes on.
So thinking mind is a wonderful thing, but it's like this attached, and we can see this playing out in our society right now. Like people are so attached to the ego and like, well, my team, no matter like, especially in the United States, I'm Republican, I'm Democrat, like other side's bad, I'm good. It's this demonization based, this attachment to view, rather than like, okay, well, like, what is, speaking skillfully, what is my truth? And that's why like I kind of contextualize, like, this is my understanding of Buddhist practice, not this is how it is. This is my experience of it. Contextualizing things is a skillful way to speak. I could be like, Pizzagate is a fact. Well, like, well, what makes you say that? And so I'm going to go back for a second, take kind of the meta view. We kind of got into some nitty gritty on self-view.
Sure.
But those practical teachings in the Eightfold Path are about, so you were describing, right, the end. What am I striving towards? What is this thing I want to get to? But the path, I remember we talked earlier about it being a transformative thing. You just have to do it. And there's this beautiful Zen quote. What do you do before enlightenment? Chop wood and carry water. What do you do after enlightenment?
Chop wood and carry water.
You do the practices. And it's not about being fixated on like the end point. You do the things and you transform. And that's why the lotus is this beautiful analogy in Buddhist practice, right? You come from the mud is your suffering. It guides your practice, right? Like, we don't come to a spiritual practice because things are great. We don't come to fitness because we're like, I'm so healthy, like, right? Like, I hurt, I'm in pain. It hurts to move my body. The same with our mental world, right? Yeah. Our spiritual world. I hurt. This is, the mud is the suffering is our nutrients. And if we practice and turn to it as our teacher, out of it comes this beautiful flower, this lotus, this blossoming. But it's the practice that we do where we transform. And so I kind of took a circuitous way of explaining it, but it's less about the endpoint and then the task of doing, right? Chopping wood and carrying water, right? Showing up, eating well, making sure you go to bed on time. It's not glorious. It's not always fun. It's not stimulating. But the more we practice in something, the more depth of knowledge we develop. I'm sure you'd agree with that, right? Like
I do agree, yeah.
Because our hyper-novel world, right, is always trying to steal our attention away from us.
10,000 subliminal advertisements a day, I think, is the current statistic from. Anyway, we won't go on that, but I think it's understanding, having spoken to you over the years as your growth has happened in this field. It is so important to be able to look through all of that and see the simplicity of things, if only you could see the forest through the trees, so to speak. And I think it's a necessary skill for most people, many people, to take a longer look at than what they currently do.
Yeah, so in a way, because I think one of the core questions you want to have was like, for the layperson, what is kind of Buddhist practice about? And it's like using our suffering and the unskillful habits, our kind of our lizard brain's propensity for, as a greed, hatred, and delusion, or like aggression, like what it wants to do naturally, like
to survive,
right? But using those as teachers, and then through the practice, kind of putting them down, our preoccupation with them, and we're creating the context for the wholesome states to arise, like generosity, patience, equanimity, and that letting go and putting down of those, again, I use defilements, but I say greed, hatred, and delusion. It's all their permutations. Like delusion can just be ignorance, confusion, right? In our environment, like, to use another fitness analogy, like, what is the best exercise for my butt? I'm going to spend 5 hours, right? Like, and like you go down this rabbit hole.
I hate that.
What's the best diet? Because we're always concerned with this hierarchy, and it creates confusion.
Yeah.
And then we all know what we need to do. Like, there's nothing radical, like, okay, go to bed, eat your vegetables, right?
Yeah.
Like, move your body a little bit,
Drink water.
Yeah.
Breathe. Like, say, yeah. It's a simple formula.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And so it's looking to those in our experience, how we create it. How do we create our own suffering? What things in our environment are contributing to it? And how can we relinquish some of our attachments so we can live more peacefully? The practice is about, peacefulness, equanimity, generating that. It might sound so like, what's that mean? But until you experience it, and you have this moment of like, oh, like, I don't have to pick up the phone. I don't have to pick up these thoughts that hurt me. I can just let them go. Like, it's a peace that's hard to describe.
We can be slaves to our thoughts and our belongings. I mean, I say that surrounded in a little room full of like just cool little knick-knack things that I think are cool. Or, I mean, some of the stuff is personal history for me, but until we realize that, I mean, it's the doom scroll, right? The drug of the doom scroll, the chain of the doom scroll. It's like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Put it down, put it down, put it down. And the dopamine hit that we get from, likes, and the acceptance that we feel from people texting me on Friday night asking me what I'm doing, or the clients emailing me with new project ideas. I mean, that's a little more necessary than that. But like, let's say, like, like, what if it's not coming in? Like, am I busy enough? Am I going to get a bunch of Christmas cards? Am I, et cetera, et cetera? Like worrying about those things, or being succumbing to the unnecessary like bridling to those thoughts. You don't see it until you kind of wake up from that matrix.
Beautifully said. I often describe it like we have this hyper novel environment that's always speaking to us more than our brains have evolved to handle. And where I find Buddhist practice, especially the practical sides, is it's like this flashlight of awareness. These practices, this scientific method we can take down and go to the cave of our own ignorance. Or we might be like, I love having all these, I love Netflix, I'm not going to give it up. But we go down this our cave, and this flashlight of awareness that says, hey, look there. What's going on there? Where are you putting your energy? I love
this analogy you're about to break out, by the way. Is this the cave and you're staring at the wall, the fire behind the outside of the cave?
Well, I mean, but it's a similar thing. And this is just one I love. It's not the not Plato's one where you're inside, you can't know something by the reflection of it.
Right.
But
right,
it's just more like, I like the Jungian psychology, and also I'm bringing a little Star Wars here.
Love it.
But it's like you go down to this cave of your own ignorance, and like a good teacher, a good therapist, Buddhist practice will say, investigate this. Like, what's this going on over here? How are you behaving? How is this hurting you? Is it hurting others? Right? Like, is it taking away from things you really want to achieve? Like the shoulding, right? Like, oh, I know I should exercise, but what are the other things you're doing that's precluding you from that? Put your awareness there. And then seeing how it's unfolding. It doesn't say change all at once. It's saying look at it. Give it some attention. This Venerable Ajahn Chah, a monk in the Thai forest tradition, said, 50 to 70% of the practice is knowing you should let go and you can't. So, but it's bringing you that awareness, and as you do that over and over again, we can talk about how meditation practice supports this. Like, you sort of like, oh, I don't have to pick it up. Like, it's not mine. Like, I don't need that anymore.
Like sticks floating in a river. There's that thought. Acknowledge it, watch it go, let it go.
And it's like any practice. You get better at it over time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm still beset by unskillful thoughts of ill will. But by and large, you're not acting on them. And
what is an unskillful thought? Is that like, I need to go play Minecraft for 6 hours? Or what is it?
That could be one. This desire
thought?
that, like, I will be better when I get X. I will be happy when I get X.
I understand. So,
or even unskillful could be anything motivated, more clearly, out of greed, lusting, right? Desire, hatred, which can also be irritation, cantankerousness, aggression.
Guilty.
Yeah, right? Like all these things. And then delusion, right? Again, something like, right, the other part of that defilement is like confusion. It's the different beliefs, right? Like our cultural conditioning that says, oh, like 6-pack abs, you'll be hot at the pool and be lovable when you have those.
Yep, just buy this, $29.99.
You walk into any like aisle, like so-and-so's got their like new face done. You should go get your face done. If you're a woman, like your beauty is your top like asset. Like, I mean, if you walk down any like grocery store aisle, like that's
any aisle anywhere.
Yeah, and it's like, how
look
powerful
how happy
is that?
I am with this thing.
Yeah. It's insidious and it's pervasive, and until you pause,
cancerous.
Yeah, but until you pause, you don't know like you're in it,
Mm-hmm.
and look at it, and then you can say, oh, when I talked about relinquishment earlier, you can start to put down these things like, is this serving me?
I love that question. I love that sentence. Does this serve me?
Mm-hmm.
How does this serve me? Is this serving me? It's a powerful reflection. Inner. It's anytime I'm about to make a less than like, do I need to drink tonight? Do I need to go out or even rewind? I mean, you and I have had some very late nights. It went into very early mornings. And once your brain gets tainted with the chemical that is alcohol, or any other chemicals, you're SOL. There's no really like inner reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much. You have a big cloud over that. But the fact that you can make that decision, you can ask yourself that question: does this serve me? Mm-hmm. Like, I've got a race next weekend. Does the consumption of alcohol, the eating of fatty foods, or anything, do I need to stay up late? Mm-hmm. As a lighter example, do I need to binge watch Netflix to blah 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 whatever? How does that serve me physically in a racing scenario, mentally in a will I be there for my family scenario? So it's just I wanted to just kind of make that kind of connection and put the finger down on that how important that one little phrase is. It can be life-changing.
Yeah, and then be able to unpack it and look at it with some generosity, some goodwill, some love, and like, oh, that's how I'm hurting myself. I mean, a simple example.
You might not know.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got one I don't mind sharing. Like, when I first began my practice, a lot of mindfulness practice, Vipassana, when people go on Vipassana retreats about...
What is Vipassana?
It translates kind of as true seeing. It's a practice from Theravada Buddhism.
True seeing, like...
True seeing, like seeing things as they are. Yeah, clear seeing. Mm-hmm. And it's looking, like, how are things actually in our life, right? And they're like different, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the breath, emotions, thoughts, the mind states. And they're all like meditation practices to kind of see how we're creating our universe, like what's going on. Is our behavior in alignment towards liberation or awakening towards enlightenment? right? These are all just ways of saying, or living my life more skillfully, how I want it to be. Yeah, am I set by delusion or confusion?
Say that again. Living your life
more skillfully.
I think those two complement, like living your life skillfully, and obviously it's a statement. The other's a question. I think those two go hand in hand. Living my life skillfully, and does this serve me?
Yeah.
Well, I think those two questions are very powerful in their own.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think to kind of dovetail on what you just kind of noticed and offered is that those are useful things. Those aren't like words or like sound bites. And this goes to the thing with the bootstraps. Like they're useful, or like, Instagram, like spiritual things. But where's the path? Right? If something doesn't describe a path or a transformative way, like this is why people come to us for coaching. Like, I don't know. I know something's wrong, but show me a path. Like, show me the way, right? Like, Luke Skywalker had Obi-Wan. Like, I want to be a Jedi. Like, I don't know how to do this, right? Like, you need a teacher to kind of show you a way. And then, okay, well, you've seen it. Well, then how are you supposed to deal with it? And I kind of go bring it back. So with mindfulness practice, right? I was driving, or I kind of catch myself. So it was actually, the practice was on skillful speech in Buddhism. That's a big part of practice is ethics. Sila is the word in Pali. And when I use the wallet language from Pali, it's like the ancient language of the Buddha. You can think like Latin in so many ways. And I was working with right speech. I'm like, being like skillful with my speech. And I would, if I was running a little late, I would I text my client, I'm running a little late. Well, why was I running late? Or I'm caught in traffic. I wasn't caught in traffic, I was just running late. Well, why was I running late? Rewind it. And I could start to see like, oh, well, you got up a little late because you stayed up too late, and you still cooked breakfast for yourself because that's important. But your dishes weren't done. So you had to do your dishes, and like these other things. You weren't going to bed early enough because you're staying up reading. You weren't kind of taking care of things. So now you are kind of white lying. Or you were lying to your client who's saying, like, I'm running late because I hit traffic. No, you didn't hit traffic. Traffic is normal. Yeah. To this time, you overscheduled yourself.
You made some bad decisions, or decisions that didn't serve you.
Yeah, they're just unskillful decisions because it was just like, and they were compiling. Mm-hmm. And if I rewound it all the way back, it might just come to something as simple, doing my dishes. I don't have a dishwasher, so it's like, if I don't do my dishes, then I have to wash them in the morning, and then my morning's pretty timed out. But that kind of behavior then would allow me to have more time and peace in the morning. The other one was like making sure I'm going to bed. Just set your alarm. I had created a whole like bed environment, but like, no, it's time to put the book down. The sleep is much more important. Because when you lie, it has this like constriction of the heart. I'm using lie or like white lying or making excuses. It doesn't feel good. When you start to like actually notice how unskillful behavior affects you. Do I want to be that person? Like you said, how does this serve me? Yeah. It's not serving me, and then I come in maybe a little rushed, and I'm not giving them
there's a physical effect.
Yeah, and then there's a physical embodiment of those feelings. Anyway, so that's just this investigative process. So that's the path, right? We have to have some sort of path or outline to begin to investigate our experience, whether it's secular or in a Buddhist practice. Like like you said, this is the point. How am I being served by these behaviors? Are they helping me live the life I want? And so many coaches out there subscribe by that and then offer a good practices and something that fits in the context of someone's life, that's timely, wise. If someone's got 3 kids and you're like, well, you need to do a super like strict bodybuilding diet if you want to achieve these physical things, you're like, that's
good luck.
Yeah, that's not the context of your life.
Hopefully they don't have any dietary restrictions also, because I'm cooking 4 meals at 4 different items on a menu every meal. Nah, I don't think so.
And then some kids got food sensitivities, and then you're a short order chef.
Exactly. And like, right. You're like, oh, and I've got to work too.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of things on social media and even in Congress, all the way up to from the BS unnecessary to the actually like the halls of governance. There is this is going back to, there's a problem. And it's like, all right, cool, there's a problem. And then someone says like, well, here's a solution, but how do we get there? And I'm not going to do I'm going to keep it pretty meta right there. So is this a good place to maybe open up what the Eightfold Path is? like how to get there. So there's a problem. I have a problem. Either it's unskillful thought, or taxes are too low on these people, or they need to be high on this people, or I'm overweight. I'm like any kind of problem. It is you mentioned, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that the Eightfold Path is the way to get there, and I guess there's why 8? Why not 6? Why not 10?
Because the Buddha was a great teacher, and that's how he laid out his process, right?
Okay.
Like the Buddha method, the Tathagata method.
Okay.
But it's laid out.
Like what's the first fold?
The first fold. Okay, it's funny I don't have to go here. Is right view.
Right.
So when I use the word right, it's translated. It's like the right tool for the job, not as in right or wrong, like a moralistic implication. It is the right tool. Like you're not gonna say, well, I need to build this house. I better use a sledgehammer. No, you need like a finishing hammer if you're going to place some nails in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the right tool for the job. The word can also be translated as skillful.
Okay.
And this is why I love this practice so much, is because it's contextualizing a 2,600-year-old path that was designed for people who didn't have a written system. The Buddha, in a way, was a reformer, and was saying the Brahmins at that time, the religious force in India at the time, they had control of writing and like the traditions. The Buddha kept an oral tradition, and everything had to be memorized. It wasn't until like anywhere between like 500, like 1,000 years later, they actually started writing things down. There's the whole wonderful story there. And so it's a very practical process for achieving enlightenment or understanding or freedom. And the first step is right view, and that right view encapsulates the Four Noble Truths. Again, that was like suffering, that the nature of suffering, which is self-centered attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have that there is a way to end it.
The acknowledgement of suffering.
That there is a way to end suffering,
okay.
And then that suffering is the Eightfold Path. And so it's this view, and that the other part is that of right view is that actions of speech and of mind and of body have consequences.
Are we in the second fold?
This is part of right view.
Okay,
there's kind of two
sure.
parts to it.
I mean, we're summing up to everyone who's listening and watching. We're summing up a 2,600-year-old solution to like all problems in one conversation.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be brushing over some things broadly.
Yeah,
here.
please forgive me, all my teachers and my teachers' teachers on this as I muddle my way through this.
I'm learning, and I'm thankful for the understanding of it, or the explanation of it.
Yeah. So right view kind of establishes, like, if you're going to go on a journey, if you're going to go hike a mountain, it's helpful to have a map. And so this is kind of establishing the map.
Okay.
And so that's this portion of right view. And the other part I mentioned was that, actions of speech, mind, and body have consequences, and that's karma, or kama. And it's kind of understood as like, oh, you cut that person off, you got a car accident. That's your karma. Like it's kind of used in a vindictive way. But it's really just actions have consequences. If you have lots of negative thoughts, anxious thoughts, and we know this as a scientific way, you keep using those neural pathways, they'll myelinate, they'll become your default program. Fear will be how you operate most quickly. Right, if we kind of bring it to our physical approach.
You are what you eat kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so thoughts speech has consequences. If someone tells you something that kind of hurts you, you can react with anger. You can react viciously with your own words. And what's that do? That provokes more anger in them.
Pushes the wheel right on down the road.
Yeah, right. So it's, and then a body, physically hurting someone, that has consequences. Hurting yourself.
To break your knuckles.
Yeah. And so that's kind of establishing view and that understanding. Then you have right view. Oh my God.
Ooh, quiz time.
Exactly.
Check your phone.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull them up because I can just get to them really quickly because I was like, right view.
This episode of the Philip Levy Show is brought to you by Nabisco Wafer Thins. Nabisco. Doesn't get much better than this.
Right intention. There we go. So right intention, or skillful intention, right, like that, is worth putting your effort towards, and how to like establish that. And then we go into sila, and this is the ethical portion of the practice, which is right speech.
There's a little wheel too. Look at that.
Yeah, so you'll see that a lot in Buddhist cosmology and like art. It's described as the Eightfold Path, and it's like a wheel with spokes on it because it's less a path and like this unfolding, and if you imagine like a corkscrew or a wheel turning,
Mm-hmm.
it's just kind of moving you upwards.
Okay.
And as you go through the Eightfold Path, you have more and more insights, and it's slow, progressive change. One of my teachers, Chris Clifford, described it beautifully. She was at a retreat in Arizona or New Mexico, and you walk this labyrinth, and you come out to the top, and you go through this shed of like Day of the Dead skeletons, and you come pass through.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
A shed of skeletons?
No, like Day of the Dead, like art.
Oh,
and so it's like
okay.
this passing through, and
right.
you get to the top. That's minor to the
And
story.
by the way, here are all the bodies.
Yeah. It's incidental to the story,
Right.
but you go through this labyrinth, this maze, and you come to the top, and it's only a little bit higher. There's a bench. You can sit back and look out on the maze you just went through.
What's a little bit higher?
I would say like high enough that you can like see the tops of it.
Okay.
And you can sit down and look back. And that's like the Eightfold Path. Each time you go through, it's kind of this maze of your own internal universe, investigating it. You come out and you're just a little bit higher. You see things a little more clearly. You're not caught in the maze. And we talked earlier about cultural conditioning, this attachments to I, me, and mine. And like it's not going to be an instant change. It's not this striving. It's things a little better. If before you were treading water and your eyes were underwater, you're like, I'm drowning. Well, maybe, now my nose is out. Things are a little more clear.
Mm-hmm.
And these, again, it's kind of contextualizing the practices. It's a slow unfolding, and that's the nature of it. So we've got right speech, and so sila is this ethics, how we, promote wellness or well-being and mitigate harm. Is a way of thinking about what is ethical. How does it affect others around us? Because it's very hard to sit and practice and meditate if you're causing harm. The mind is beset by like delusion that this is okay to hurt other beings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could talk about this all day, but I'm again trying to give this. Then you have right action, context, like working for the good of others.
Mm-hmm.
Right livelihood, right? Are you selling drugs? Are you smuggling people? Like, what does your job entail? Is it ethically aligned? How do you make your money? Then we have right effort. So we're going into kind of like the concentration practices.
Mm-hmm.
Samadhi is the word. And when I say concentration, again, I love the richness of words. Like taking something from one culture and learning its nuances helps kind of us paint a broader picture of our experience as human beings.
Yes.
Like
yes.
other language. That's why languages are so rich and interesting to me. Because there'll be a word, right? Komorebi, like in Japanese, where it's like the light coming through the trees. We have a word for that.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
There's something absolutely unique and beautiful about komorebi. Komorebi. And there's nothing like it. Light coming through this window behind you, not like it. Light coming through a stained glass window, not like it. But light coming through even different types of trees,
right.
It's a little bit different, and it has a very nice effect.
Yeah. And so I like to give this Pali word too. And so we have samadhi, and samadhi, as we build concentration, it's more like a letting go of mental preoccupations. I keep describing this practice as of renunciation or letting go.
Mm-hmm.
We're letting go of greed, hatred, and delusion, and that's what these practices are about. So we have like skillful effort. Are we striving? Or are we working diligently? Are we chopping wood and carrying water? How are we chopping that wood and carrying water? Are we like, I hate this wood, I hate my life, right? Like, or are we bringing to it a gentleness, a clear-mindedness, focus? Mm-hmm. We have specifically right concentration and right mindfulness, and those will encapsulate like meditation practice. And then it comes back to right view. And so that's, so wisdom, concentration. So wisdom is right view and right intention. Mm-hmm. Right ethics is going to be speech, action, and livelihood. And then concentration is effort, concentration, and mindfulness. Is typically how it's broken down through these practices. And those are very much practical applications and ways to investigate our experience.
I like that, investigate our experience.
Yeah.
I don't think many people do that. I think they just kind of canoes drifting along the river, or hey, it is what it is, and here we go floating. But like when you start to swim up and see I'm in a river. I had no idea. Let's see what else we can do here. and investigate your what did you say? Investigate
your
existence?
Experience.
Okay.
Yeah. And I want to give a shout out though to everyone, because I'm very privileged that like I don't have a bunch of dependents who need me to work tirelessly. Like I, work for myself. Right. I have time and space to really dedicate myself to this practice and investigate. Some people are just very busy, and it's hard. Change, and that's the point of compassion. Is change is hard. Trying to rewire your brain requires skillful effort. It requires some resources. Like if you're trying to keep shelter over your head and food on your table, it's very difficult to be like, let me dedicate myself fully to any sort of practice.
Yes.
So kind of make a shout out there.
Well, and this might be a good opportunity to segue into what I, in my limited experience, have found to be a very powerful tool to acknowledge the river that I'm in, and perhaps start to swim in and change my own course, and that's meditation. And as someone who has been practicing, for lack of a better term, religiously, meditation for the past, I've dabbled in the past, but for the past year, I've been pretty good about first thing in the morning, 10 minutes of guided meditation. And I know you've been on that path for longer than I have, but maybe we could talk a little bit about what meditation is and how it's, and the tool that it is and what it does. Because I think many people who are just like, oh, meditation, like that's just kind of sitting in a pillow for, and staring at the wall. Like, so can we open that up a little bit?
Yeah, of course, I'd love to. So, I think there's a lot of mythology, and especially in the West, and some confusion about meditation practice. Because we'll hear like it's no thinking or no thoughts. Thoughts are bad. And in our very binary, dualistic kind of thinking in the West, like good, bad, it's like thoughts are bad. So this is like, I gotta eliminate thoughts. But in so many ways, meditation is a practice to stop associating with the self, that attachment, right? And to do that, I'm just thinking about, I might take a step back here.
Sure, take your time.
We've all had that experience, right, where we've been at dinner with someone we love, and they're like telling us about their day, what they've done, who they interacted with, and we go, I'm sorry, honey, like, can you tell me again? Like, you just completely lost in thought. And meditation practice is about building the skill to align the head, the heart, and the body in the same place and time, right? To not be beset by mental preoccupations. And it's a very simple practice of just seeing when thoughts have arisen and letting them pass through us. There's like this brain's tendency, right? It's always looking to judge things as good, bad, neutral, pleasurable, unpleasurable, neutral, and create hierarchies. It wants to know, like, do I want to move towards this or away from this? Pain, gross, I want to get away from it. Pleasurable, I want more of that. And when we sit, we're calming the mind. We're looking at that lizard brain and be like, hey, what's going on here? What are you searching for? And it's a simple practice of establishing the anchor, usually on the breath, the body. Establishing an anchor.
An anchor.
Yeah, an anchor.
Not anger.
Yeah, not anger. No, an anchor. Usually the breath, the sensations of the breath, the body, sounds. It's different in different traditions. A candle sometimes, if they have a visual. And when our mind starts getting lost in thought, seeing it and gently saying, thinking. Coming back to the anchor. And that's it. And we're starting to establish this continuity of mindfulness. Right? We talked about like right concentration earlier. It's this continuity of mindfulness. The thing we're doing is all we're doing. Right? Everything else doesn't exist. This is all chatter in the brain. The brain's looking for problems to solve. But if I'm drinking coffee with you, I'm drinking coffee with you. And starting to build that continuity and like, I can let go of these mental preoccupations. I can let go of this static that's always playing. And so when we practice this, especially at the beginning level, it's like, I'm calm. Like, this is nice. These feelings kind of come up. And it's not about creating good states or bad states. Same, right? Like, they have the same absolute value because they're teaching us, this is where I'm getting caught up in my mental preoccupations. And can provide insight. Again, insight meditation is a big practice because it allows us to see how we're creating our suffering. Like, I'll have thoughts of like ill will towards my boss, like, or my coworkers. What's going on there? How can I look to that as my teacher. Again, that flashlight of awareness.
Looking at the thought themselves.
Not necessarily. Not during
as
meditation.
teachers?
We just start to see, yes, the nature of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Our suffering, I keep coming back to this, is our teacher. Like, how is greed, hatred, and delusion motivating us? How are we acting on those behaviors? How is that exacerbating our suffering, the pain we experience in this life? And so meditation allows us to settle the mind, settle the body, and start to see things as they really are. Like, oh, these are just manifestations. And it takes a lot of practice. And at the beginning, it's wonderful just to settle, right? Thich Nhat Hanh describes this nonstop radio that we have playing in our head.
Who is Thich Nhat Hanh?
He is a Buddhist monk from Vietnam. He was kicked out of Vietnam. He spent some time with MLK. I think he's currently in France with Plum Village, if I remember. But he's a renowned monk and teacher, and he's written a ton of books. And he often describes it as like this nonstop radio chatter in our head. And we're kind of like, oh, I can turn down the volume. And again, it's not about limiting thoughts. It's about coming to just kind of see them as they are. Mm-hmm. These manifestations. In the West, we've trained our thinking mind to always be on. We want rational thought. We want to use the scientific method. We're always looking to solve problems. This is how we are inculcated very early to our relationship to thinking. It's a power to change the world. What if we could just turn it off? Or just be still, less preoccupied, less attached? So my meditation practice supports this blossoming of the lotus, if you will, this ethical practice, because we can see, oh, that's how I'm getting held up. That's how I'm contributing to my suffering. That's how I might be visiting suffering upon others by speaking unskillfully. And it takes time and reflection. Even if it's only 5 minutes. Who said this? Lopo Cha or Ajahn Chah, the Thai monk. Like, people say, oh, I'm a very busy teacher, or I'm a parent, or I'm a farmer. Like, I don't have time to sit and meditate. And he would say, do you breathe? Do you eat? You can meditate. So it's just bringing your full mindfulness. I'm eating like one bite at a time, paying attention to each bite as you chew. Or I've got a breath. All I have is this breath, right? Maybe as you're walking through a doorway, oh, take a breath. Where am I? One of the tools I give my students is you can always check in with your body and just ask, where am I? How am I? You put a little Post-it on your monitor. Like, I'm getting caught up. My boss is saying complete shit. I'm like, oh, that's not true. Or, where am I? I'm in my room. How am I? There's tension. Mm-hmm. Okay, let it go. What's the behavior I want to address? Well, that's kind of a circuitous way, but meditation supports ethical practice, and ethical practice supports meditation. The two are completely intertwined. And in the West, though, right now, which is great, this period we're living in, you could say early meditation teachers, like at Spirit Rock, brought it over, and we're very intentional. Like, we want to give this tool to everyone, and there's such a push in the West, like anti-religion. A lot of us grew up with in Christian traditions or Catholic traditions, whatever you may be, and this preoccupation with rules, and like, you have to do this. And so they kind of like, let's just teach mindfulness practice as it is, Vipassana. And then, and that's great. Let's get into lots of people, right? Like Headspace, Calm, Sam Harris, like all these people are offering these wonderful tools for people to start like cluing in, investigating, getting calm, like not being so reactive, not being beset by this hostile world that's being sold to us every moment. If we went to the news, like it's very like, it doesn't matter who it is, someone's out to get you, someone's going to come loot you, your politicians are out to get you.
Right? This is why you should be afraid.
Yeah.
And this is why you should watch us telling you that you should be afraid.
Yeah, and like your neighbor's out to get you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, is that really how it is? And so the two support each other like that. Meditation practice is just about settling in and helping us see things more clearly. And one of the issues I've had, you gave me a soapbox, it's so nice. But in my own practice and how I teach is that, like, for me, the meditation practices are great initially. Just, but there's got to be more. Because it's nice to get calm and centered, but it's like eating white rice versus brown rice. You've taken a spiritual tradition or practice out of its context. And so it's just like, I talked about earlier, how ethics and meditation...
follow that analogy at all.
Okay, sorry. So ethics... ethical behavior, Eightfold Path, and meditation support each other. The two are inexplicably linked. Yeah. And what we've done in the West is kind of take out meditation and not teach the ethical portion.
Ah.
Right? And so in the same way, right, we've taken, it's like white rice and brown rice.
One's
still edible and it's great, but then you're missing all the nutrients, the full context of the practice.
I understand now.
And so with some of my clients now, like I'm like, oh, you're going to get, mindfulness-based practice, but you're going to get in the context of the brown rice, the Eightfold Path too, because this is how the Dhamma or these teachings have worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to, because it's a way to investigate our experience. Meditation's great for calming the mind, creating concentration, or allowing samadhi to arise. But we also need to then, I think I said earlier, we are creating the context for growth and change, to allow the wholesome states to arise and the unwholesome to be let go of them or weed them. And we need something to replace them, right? So we're getting calm and centered in meditation. Well, then how do we use that? Anyway, so, and that's not to say people, you shouldn't meditate. Definitely, please meditate. But if you find that it's not like serving you, or like, hey, well, what's next?
Yeah.
Investigate. Find something that's useful for you to, like, we said earlier that you liked, right? How is this serving me? Right? How do I use this to investigate my experience? Am I causing myself harm? And I use that very broadly.
Sure.
But, yeah.
So where would someone? And I want to keep this because we could go and go and go. I want to tail this off with this. Where could someone start this process, of meditation? Because in my opinion, I feel like meditation is kind of like, oh, there's the door. Like, let's kind of jiggle the handle and see what's going on, and eventually the door might open to what you have the potential to become. So my question is, how does one meditate? How would that? What does that look? What's the simplest way for someone who is busier than me, or as busy as some of the people that we work with, to start a practice of meditation?
So there are countless apps. Everyone in pretty much the world now has a phone.
Okay.
I'm going to put that out there. So the easiest way is finding an app. Even if it's a little more secular, it's still a wonderful way to start meditating and just dipping your toes in and getting to experience those things. And everyone's path is going to be a little bit different. So I found Headspace and like other books out there. Some people like Calm. I know Sam Harris has one, Waking Up. I haven't used it myself.
I use it every morning.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. So plenty of meditation apps out there. Insight Timer, I believe, is another one where there are like different teachers on it. And just exploring. We have a wealth YouTube. So a lot of apps will have like a preset kind of route, like learning how to do the fundamentals. And that's a wonderful way to start. Watching different videos on YouTube. Like how-to meditation basics. I'm just putting that out there.
What about something? I'd like to bring it back even simpler, right? Without the use of electronics. What if someone were to place their as much attention as possible on their breath for just like 3 breaths? Would that count?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that definitely would. It's not. I like to separate out. The practice isn't about kind of striving or like a marathon. It's not like I gotta get my miles in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's helpful, right? Like I said, the second part is skillful effort. Right? We do have to give it energy and attention in the Eightfold Path. But if you can only get one breath, like I said with Lopo Cha or Ajahn Chah, if that's all you have, use it. All right, that's all you need. It's creating mindfulness, attention, settling the mind and body and heart the same place and time. Right, where am I? How am I? So if that's all you can have time for, practice that. If you're doing the dishes, this is in like our tradition, one of the things they have us do, it's like a common chore, do that and just that. And every time your mind wanders, come back to like the dishes. Think about the thing you have to do next. Keep washing the dishes. What does it feel like to scrub, get off all the particles? Some people have...
Being present on the most inane of things.
Yeah, that you have to do anyway. Are you brushing your teeth? This one's hard.
Yeah.
Try it.
My mind is always somewhere else when I'm brushing my teeth. When I'm washing the dishes, I do think about the dish, but I also find myself... there is something meditative about... I was a busser in my parents' restaurant when I was little, and I was like... I like this sprayer. I've never minded washing dishes, or it's kind of shunned, I guess. It's like, oh, washing dishes, like, Yeah, but I've always found it meditative. It's just because you're right then and there, and you're handling something breakable, usually, and you're just, did I get it? Did I get it? And I'm focused on this, and I've always enjoyed it. Not that I want to do it in my free time all the time, but I just felt kind of a satisfaction from doing it every now and again.
Yeah. But it's the chopping wood and carrying water. And so if I could offer anyone who's listening to this a useful tool, it's chop wood and carry water, finding depth and mindfulness in mundane tasks. Giving it your full attention is a wonderful meditation practice, whether it's brushing your teeth, washing the dishes, changing the baby's diapers, washing your hands, right? In the time of the pandemic, do the full ABCs or just give them the full 20 seconds, right? Or like whatever, tying your shoes, that might be all you have for the day, right? Opening the door in your car before your commute. Listen to the sound, the click, right? How does it feel to sit in the chair? Adjust your seat or your mirrors. It's become such a pattern, right? But give yourself fully over and just see how that feels. If that's all you can do, that's all you do. And that's all I would offer is like, that's a wonderful place to start. You don't need an app, right? You just need an intention, a little bit of effort, and apply that over time.
I love it. Let's end it there.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah.
And I hope you all enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.